welcome to the Women Waves podcast. Today we've got some amazing women on with us. We've got the incredible Judy Counihan, who is a creative director, an executive producer, just an overall boss woman. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, Judy?
Yeah, I recently been working with Alicia on a Netflix series called Fate, the Winx Saga. That's how I met Alicia, but I've been in film and television for an inordinately long time. And I will tell you how long, because then you'll know how old I am. I think I've been in it for approximately 30 years, which is...
Wow.
Yes, I know, which is a good thing and a very bad thing. But, and I've made, foreign language, Oscar-winning films to comedy sitcoms to the latest Netflix. I've got a very broad range of things that I've made, and I've seen the industry go from when I started a very closed industry to gradually opening up more and more. Bit of a journey. And I'm married. I have 2 sons, a dog, and I've lived in New York, Paris, and London.
Pretty damn cool.
How long did you live in Paris for?
Well, on and off. I used to be married to a Frenchman.
Nice.
Yeah. So I lived in Paris throughout my 20s. I sort of visited there a huge amount. And then I lived there about 15 years ago. Maybe 20 odd years ago. For about a year and a half, I lived there. My sons were at school there for a bit. And then I came back here. I divorced my French husband, who actually lives at the bottom of my road. Shout out to Bertrand. And and I moved back to London. I live in Brixton and have done for many years, and born and bred in London.
You chose London over France, America.
The thing that I realised about London, I mean, I don't know what anyone feels about today, but having lived in New York, which was an extraordinary experience in the early 90s, and that was an amazing experience, and then living in Paris, London, when I came back, I realised how much I love London and how phenomenally creative and diverse it is compared to anywhere else I've lived. And also oddly, the way because I had 2 young children when I moved back from Paris. My experience of children in this country is they have the most phenomenal social lives, because so many people in London don't live near their families. I did, but a lot of people don't, and so a lot of people form their own families with small children, and that is I had the most incredible experience bringing up my children because of that easygoing sociability, that people are very, very connected to each other through their children in London, my experience. Not so in Paris, and not so in New York. So that's why, living and working and bringing up children in London was the best experience compared to New York or Paris.
Would you say you can be anywhere in the world and still do the same, especially in your type of work as a producer? You can choose where to be, especially with everything being quite remote now.
I don't think you can, though. Fundamentally, creativity involves groups, and it's very difficult to be creative online together, because what you pick up in a room with people and working with people, Alicia will know this, it's exactly, you can't really act remotely with people because our senses are picking up constant shifts and changes in people's emotions, a look, a wink, a laughter, a sideline. You go into riffs of you go completely off tangents and talk about nonsense, but it ends up feeding whatever it is you're making. So whether you're musicians or actors or writers or producers, it's a team effort. And I'm a vampire. I feed off people's energy. And it is the joy of why I work in a creative industry.
Yeah.
It is the biggest upside to all the nonsense and shit we have to do, is being with people with a common goal.
Yeah.
And people working so incredibly hard, but always having a laugh doing it. And it's very sort of life affirming, really. And you don't get that on Zoom, trust me.
No, you don't. How have you found working during lockdown then? Has that impacted you quite a bit?
Really difficult, really difficult. On the one hand, I think it's incredibly productive, weirdly, on one level, okay? Because I'm not in an open plan office. My focus, I can focus down on things. It's very sort of back to back. But on the other hand, it's pretty dispiriting because there's none of that side chat or sidebarring or just chatting general nonsense with each other, which in the end, and picking up information, because when we're all together, I will hear something going on over here and it will lodge in my head and I'll go, oh yeah. Whereas a lot of things fall through the gaps because you're constantly not able to pick up random pieces of information. So and actually also it's pretty miserable. I really like getting dressed up, going to work. Sorry, but I do. I mean, bloody sweatpants. I'm actually wearing who wants that? God almighty.
No. And Judy, you have impeccable dress sense, so
this is absolutely true, Alicia. And it's one of the joys, though. I mean, like, it's pretty fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is that superficial? I don't think
No,
so.
it's not. It's so
not.
true.
Never.
It's and just being with people, who are who really are. I'm very fortunate where I work because we do like to laugh a huge amount. And pretty much all the productions I work on, I work with people who really like to laugh a lot. Because what else is there, really? It doesn't have to be miserable. And we try to ensure that it isn't. And being in lockdown
is ensuring that it is.
Come on. I even missed the tube.
Really?
Oh
yeah.
I wouldn't go that far.
No.
I really miss it. Because I love watching people.
Yeah, true.
I what I love about going to work is I pick up pieces again of information, what people are reading, what the billboards are saying, how people are reacting. I look at people's faces. I study people's faces. I study the fashion they're wearing. I absolutely love looking at people. Endlessly fascinating. And I think on some level, it is quite creative to pick up. That's why I live in a city. I don't want to live in the country. Are you kidding me? I choose to live in a city because I'm interested in the differences of people and different cultures and different ways of how people show themselves. I think it's how I stay in touch, really. I don't want to stay in touch via a screen.
Just want to cuddle.
Well, hopefully soon things will start getting back to normal, and I think we're all going to appreciate it so much more than we ever have before as well. That's probably the best thing to come out of it.
We're going to go wild.
Well, I think as Chris, who I work with, says, everyone's just going to be drunk from June 12th onwards.
That's true.
I need a cuddle.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We've also got Charlie, who is the CEO of the Girls Network charity. Tell us about yourself, what you've been doing.
I'm Charlie, co-founder and CEO of the Girls Network, and we are a mentoring charity supporting 14 to 19-year-old girls from the least advantaged communities around the country by matching them with a professional woman. And the woman acts as a mentor for them over the course of the year to build skills and build confidence, but also to open up networks and opportunities that they might otherwise not have access to, so they can be ambitious for their futures, whatever it is they care about or are passionate about, and we can support them to realise those ambitions. So that's how I spend my days. But really interesting what you were saying, Judy, about the sort of being in person and not as well. So we transitioned all of our mentoring online, and it's in some respects been amazing. And I think for some girls it's been more accessible, but we've really lost that buzz and that connection being in the room together. The way we match mentors and mentees is through a sort of speed networking event, and that's amazing because like people connecting and learning about each other simultaneously is an experience that you just can't replicate, I don't think, virtually. So very excited to be getting back to in-person mentoring and events as well.
And have people been doing like Zoom mentoring sessions during all of this? Is that how it's been working?
Yeah, it's been running on different platforms, depending on sort of security levels and where the girls have given consent, and parents have given consent.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've been hosting virtual workshops as well. And some of it's been lovely because it's meant that both mentors and mentees from opposite ends of the country have been able to be in the same place at the same time and feel part of that bigger national network. So it has had some really positive elements to it as well. But I think going forwards, we'll keep both in some guise and benefit from both of them.
We've also got Theresa Enemua on with us today, who is part of the Girls Network. So do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself, Theresa?
So my name's Theresa, I'm 15 years old, I'm a part of the Girls Network, and in 2020, October 2020, I became the second Miss Teen Nigeria, so I'm a pageant queen.
Amazing.
And I have a little charity called My Body Is Mine, which focuses on period poverty, sexual assault, and female genital mutilation.
Wow. How did the charity start?
Because of the pageant, they were like, oh yeah, you need to start a business that, is related to like a charity of your choice or related to a topic of your choice. And I was like, well, I do know people that have been sexually assaulted. I do know period poverty is a real thing. Even in this country, we still have incidents like period poverty anyway. So why not I raise awareness for that? So that's what, inspired me to start My Body Is Mine.
Beautiful.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
At 15, I don't know what I was doing, but I definitely wasn't creating a charity.
How did you first get into the Girls Network?
Actually, it's actually quite funny because I wasn't meant to be a part of it. I was told to get somebody who was meant to be a part of the workshop. And then I went to the teacher and I was like, Miss, I can't find this person. And she's like, you know what, you just come instead. And I was like, okay. And then, what's her name? Tegan came and she was doing a talk about the Girls Network and talking about the different stages and whatnot. So I was like, you know what, I'm quite interested in this. I like, networking. I like enlarging in my, I wouldn't say platform, but allow myself to connect to other people for opportunities and vice versa. So I was like, yeah. So I filled in the little sheet that I got given and I just found out I was a part of it. And I was like, oh, wow. And the thing is, I wasn't meant to be a part of it in the first place. So I just feel like it was a blessing in disguise.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how has it impacted you? What has it helped you do? What has it helped you overcome?
I think one thing by having a mentor, I feel like there's somebody to talk to get advice from. Because this whole pandemic has really shown me if you don't have that sort of person in your life that can, give you help, you'll be lost. And I feel like in this pandemic, it's really shown us that you need to make yourself open to people and, interact with people because that's what can keep you going, if you get what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a very difficult time. And it's so hard on people's mental health and everything. So it's amazing that you have someone to talk to when you need.
So, Theresa, I know your school because I walk past it a lot.
Oh.
Right? So what's interesting about Theresa's school is it's sort of near the route where Sarah Everard walked. It was all that neighbourhood. And in fact, she lived in the road next to me here. So I want to know, how did that impact you and your friends?
I was scared, extremely scared. And I was like, even though it happened in the nighttime, it can also happen in the daytime too. Like, we need to remember, kidnapping isn't just, oh, put this thing on your face at night, we rob you, whatever. It's not like that. It can happen anytime, anywhere. And I feel like Poinders Road is obviously it's a neighbourhood, and from what I've seen, people don't really come out like that. So anything can happen. And as you can see, it happened to Sarah. May her soul rest in peace. Like, it's just so sad and unfortunate. It's very disheartening. And my friends as well, we've been talking about it. It's just been a talk. Oh, you guys make sure you're careful. call me when you get home, message me when you get home. If you think anything is dodgy, call me. That's literally the discussions I have with my friends, and we shouldn't have to have those type of discussions. I should be talking about, have you revised for mocks, which start next week. But you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Did you guys used to like talk about that sort of stuff before this happened? Would you always kind of message each other to say you'd got home and that type of stuff, or was it more so because of what happened?
We've always told each other, yeah, make sure you get home safe, call me when you get home. It's just been a thing that we've just been brought up with because of the society that we live in. But I feel like now, because it's happened close to where we would usually hang about, it's become like a very main thing. Because if this has happened in a neighbourhood, near a school, in fact, near 3 schools, if I'm correct, then it can happen anywhere. And it has happened in many places, and it's so sad. And I feel like also it's brought the discussion about, oh, what if it was a black girl? Or because the majority of people that the demographics in my school are people from the BAME community. And there was another girl, Blessing, in October. She was found at a beach dead, but nothing was done.
Yeah.
So it's like, if so much awareness has been raised for somebody who is white, then how much somebody who has who's a part of the BAME community, and we've kind of had that discussion multiple amount of times, and it's really sad.
Yeah,
it's really sad. So yeah.
Yeah, I think there was like 7 articles that came out about the young woman found on the beach, and compared to Sarah Everard. So I think there's so much that we need to open our eyes basically, and make awareness for everybody. And I think we are moving that way.
Yeah.
But it's just a shame that it had to happen.
Yeah. And I'm not ignoring the fact that it happens to guys, because it does. But I feel like for ladies as well, because it's a constant like occurrence, like it's always happening. It's like, what's being done? You know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, it's great that you're having these conversations with your friends as well, and I think it's just important to keep the conversation going and keep raising awareness whenever we can about these types of issues. I think it's really interesting seeing how men have reacted to this too, like especially online, seeing how a lot of men I know have agreed with what's happening and like understanding about their behaviours more and starting to question themselves and stuff, which is great. But then you've also got that other side of the guys who are kind of like not all men, and I just think it's really interesting to see how different people react to it all.
I think there's often a challenge with things like this where there's so much nuance and there are so many complexities. You've got all of that intersectionality that Theresa was referencing with gender and race particularly at play, and I think there can be a risk the kind of medium where we talk about these things publicly, particularly online, can lose some of the detail of the conversation. And I think, therefore, it can become very divisive. So I think there have been a lot of men I know who have really struggled with this feeling of I'm feeling like I'm being attacked, and I actually want to help and do something. And this, it feels like this sort of struggle between those two things. And you know, they're being great and asking questions and listening. And one friend was part of a conversation with women sharing their experiences about feeling unsafe or being assaulted. And the different things that they could do, and he could do in particular. And he said one of the helpful things was understanding what are those situations and scenarios that make you feel unsafe. So I understand the times when I should intervene, where actually me saying something or being present is useful, because there's the lists of things to do are great, but it's actually also helpful to understand what that experience is like for a woman or a girl. So I can better recognise where something's happening as well. So I thought that was a really interesting response, where I think others have felt attacked by it. And I think it's just, it doesn't help anybody if people have become very siloed and feel like they're being attacked. The helpful thing is to talk and listen and think about how we can collectively work together to improve things.
Yeah, definitely.
I think though, I mean, I have 2 sons, and I remember them saying to me, what is the best thing I can do to support and change behaviour towards women? And I think, well, why don't you listen? Because ultimately, a lot of men react out of shame, okay, because they're feeling attacked, but that is not going to change anything. No. And part of it is to understand, in terms of communicating, is it's really important to listen, and take action based on what you've learnt through listening, as opposed to jumping in and thinking you understand. And the same applies, obviously, to any issues around race, which is really complex. And a lot of people feel deeply ashamed of the society which has enabled, sexism, racism, misogyny to perpetuate. And the sort of longer I've looked at it, the more I recognise the sort of, we do a lot of unconscious bias training, etc. And everyone has a blind spot. That's the thing. And it's to encourage people out of these blind spots. And that involves all manner of different layers of empowerment, from, I feel really, I feel quite strongly, there's been a lot of, I've always mentored people. And what I've observed happening is that each generation has its own battle, big battles, whether it's, workplace, childcare, whatever it is, our rights can never be taken for granted, ever. And they need to be enforced. But the issue is that you get a generational shift, and it requires, like the moment we're having now is really important. Okay, and it's really important for all matters concerning race, misogyny, everyday sexism. It's incredibly, these are all part of this framework in which we all live and we all contribute to, some more than others, okay? But fundamentally, we have to keep the eye on the prize. And the eye on the prize is not people who share issues of oppression and discrimination and inequality, but the people who enforce it, sustain it, and basically perpetuate it. And it's identifying what are those structures, who are those people enforcing those structures. And very often it isn't the majority, it isn't this, it's the power structures that have to be challenged day in, day out. You never take your eye off the prize. I always say that during the 90s, 80s and 90s, women in particular were told to just buy a big bag and so there was a kind of taking, I think, feminism sort of taking its eye off what was going on and basically taking foot off the pedal. Hence where we are now, which is now we've got a bigger fight. Okay, because although changes really have been made, but not enough, not quick enough, same old, why are we on Clapham Common with Sarah Everard or Blessing, or, why is this? And it is because it is utterly normalised. It is utterly normalised. Absolutely normalised. My big beef is, I do not understand why violence in the home is called domestic. I will never understand it. It minimises it. It's violence. We call it violence in the home. Not domestic, which means it's private and no one should have access to it and no one should call it out. And these are things that really deeply, deeply normalise our experiences. Really normalise them. And I will, until in the business that I work in, we would never now write a show where a woman is sexually victimised or where sexual violence is utterly explicit, where it's always women being killed by a serial killer. That feels very, very, 10 years ago that was acceptable. It's not acceptable now. Okay. So that is a change.
Yeah.
I think your point about changing the systems and structures is really important as well. And it's been one of the things we've been thinking about, as well as supporting individual girls and women, is how can we in our way have an influence on those structures? Like who are the people in power? Where are the levers of power? And what can we do to affect them? And actually, really, how can we enable the girls and young women we're working with to speak to those levers of power and change things? Because that, to me, is where there's some real power. The voices and the experiences of girls and young women talking to those people that are making the decisions and maintaining those structures. I think there's real opportunity for exciting change.
Definitely.
Yeah, I just feel like it's one of those things that I think I'm going to take Black Lives Matter for an example. You have so many young people talking about it, so many young people, especially through social media, were trying to get their opinions across. And it's like when we tried to do that, we weren't listened to. And I don't know if it's a race thing or the fact that they just don't want to listen to young people and accept the ideas that we have for society. So this, obviously, the same thing happened when we tried to express our opinions, when we tried to express our ideas through like protesting. You have people like Priti Patel saying, "Oh, there should be bills and laws on protest." Like, I'm so sorry. Who the hell do you think you are? Because if that was your daughter, if that was your family friend, if that was close to home, you wouldn't have that mindset. And I think that she's just ignoring the fact that it's a girl. Somebody like you, I don't know how old she is, but maybe she could have been young enough to be a daughter. How would you feel? And I think it just goes to show when people have power, it gets to their heads and you think you're superior, you think you're better than everybody else. Like, come on. You're literally a common person like me, just in a place of power. And the thing is, when you have power, use it to make a positive change. Even though society is a bit backward sometimes, sometimes we don't have the right ideas or whatever, use your power, use your influence to make a positive change. Because at the end of the day, if you want our society to be a better place for all, then we all need to make efforts. But if you have that big effort and it's like, if I decide to make one good thing, people will change. Even though not everyone will change, but their hearts will turn and be like, maybe what I'm doing is wrong. Maybe I need to fix the way I talk to people or stuff like that. Is the little things. And like Tesco says, every little helps, because it really does. Every little helps.
Every little does help. And the most important thing, I was talking to someone this week about how important it is for people to protest. It is absolutely vital. And it doesn't matter, you know, if you look at those protesters in Myanmar at the moment, or the protesters in Hong Kong, or the Black Lives Matter, they went up against armed state actors, and they were fearless and they did it. And it is, someone says, you know, if enough people come, something will change. Something. We don't know what. May not change now, but I firmly believe in protest, and I absolutely do not believe you can protest from a screen from a tweet.
It's impossible.
That is part of it. Part of pressure is to be collective and to act in a collective, with a collective voice. And you can do that economically, and you can do that by calling people out. I'm not big on the shaming culture, because I don't think I think it drives things underground. I think part of the whole white supremacy, you know, anonymity thing online is that it drove it underground, and everyone, you know, we all saw it coming, but the powers that be ignored that. It's about visibility. Yeah. Got to be visible in your protest and not hide.
And you know online. What? I actually went to the Black Lives Matter protest on the 3rd of June. And I feel like when you stand together, you see the universal pain. Because people at the protest, I would say it's a sample, or it's a small size of what you would see worldwide. And I think when you're together, it really shows that it's not a joke. It really shows that you're serious about it. But unfortunately, even though we protest and we come together, the society and the parliament, for example, still think, you know what, these they're just trying to do this for show or whatever, they don't really care. And you do have some people with that mindset, oh, these guys are just going to have a laugh or to have fun. But until you realise, when it's close to home, until you feel the pain for yourself, you won't actually have that sort of remorse or actually care. And it's very sad.
But it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because globally, the level of protest is growing, which I think is fascinating. So whether it's in Belarus or Myanmar or Hong Kong or London, or Washington or Seattle or LA. It's happening. And that's why it has to continue happening in a way, because there's a kind of feeling. I hear what you're saying, Theresa, about people sharing their pain, but I also wonder if it's about sharing a sort of, that you feel supported and not alone, and sort of a solidarity, which is so we don't have to feel so alone in our experiences, which, let's face it, lockdown hasn't helped.
Yeah.
People are now protesting about the protests happening during COVID. And obviously you're going to have to pay a fine and all these things, and that's why people are protesting. So what do you feel about that? Because it then counterparts your protest.
I think first things first, it's absolutely disgusting that the government have tried, or I think it's then the second stage of passing the bill, to take away freedom, because literally it's taking away people's freedom. Is if I want to do something, it's not a crime that I speak out on an injustice. I just think it just shows that the human nature that was once in these people is just evaporated. It's disappeared into thin air. You know what I'm saying? Because, like I said before, and it just goes back to the point I was making. When people have power, it gets into their heads, and they forget about what society truly is and what we should stand for in society. In the UK, one thing they say, democracy. They scream that word like it's nothing. They scream it like it's a cup of tea. Democracy, but my democracy, my freedom is being taken away just because you don't agree with an idea that is meant to benefit society. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't make sense. It actually doesn't make sense to me. It sounds very stupid, and I just wish I could go to Parliament and tell these people, I don't think you know what you're doing, because at the end of the day, if you're saying people can't protest for free, then people are going to continue to protest, and I don't think they're going to see any money. Literally, I don't know if it's a corona thing. Oh, yes, the UK economy is losing out on money, X, Y, and Z. That's why they want to charge people, fine people to protest. Like, it just gets me mad, honestly.
The more cynical part of me would go, there is a movement in the world where, the autocrats and the authoritarians are clamping down. And I think, what Extinction Rebellion showed very clearly was that there was a means of protest if people were willing to be arrested and clog up the system, which is a very clever protest stance. And it requires people to go, yes, I am willing. Some people cannot do that because their jobs are in jeopardy. You understand that. But there are people willing to do that. And what this government, I think, are trying to do is clamp down on any form of democratic protest which calls them to account. That is what is going on. And you're right, our civil liberties are being completely taken from us, because it's a fundamental right and a fundamental part of free speech to go up against the government, of course, of the day. Why would you not be? That is what liberal democracies are supposed to support, but they'll go to any lengths to prevent that. And part of me thinks, I wonder if it's because when this lockdown ends, they might consider the fact that there might be quite a lot of protests.
Yeah.
I mean,
most probably.
I'll throw that out there to the floor. I wonder
we'll meet you there, Judy.
the writing is on the wall. I mean, there is a generation of extreme, freedom is so vulnerable in a way, and rights are so easily eroded. They're so easily taken, and I think that realization, people are waking up to the fact that just because we had rights does not mean they can't be taken away.
Yeah, definitely.
And for some people, they never even experienced those rights.
Yeah, we don't have rights, really, do we?
At all.
If they can be taken away.
It feels like there's a lot of sort of acting out of fear to some extent as well, doesn't it? Like those in authority are afraid of the challenge and the discussion, and perhaps a simpler way is to suppress that rather than engaging. As you said, Judy, it's the healthy part that you want whoever's in power to have challenge and check and balance. You want there to be a mechanism by which they can be held to account or questioned, and so we don't end up in a tyranny. And yeah, it feels like there's a lot of fear of losing power.
Well, and that comes from what, you know, the change that we're in, I think, at the moment. I mean, we're in it in this country with our reckoning. I heard a wonderful podcast with David Harewood about our post-colonial, you know, our colonial past. And in this country, there needs to be a reckoning with that, really. You know, and the post-colonial fallout of that, in the same way as in America, you know, the rise of white supremacists is the understanding that power will eventually be taken. I mean, guess what? You know, and that generates a lot of fear from people. There was a lot of fear, you know, in South Africa at the end of apartheid. You know, there was a huge amount of fear. Which is why Mandela was so extraordinary in transitioning from apartheid, relatively speaking. I say relatively speaking, with a lack, you know, not as much violence. Relative being very important. There was a degree and the fallout, but there was such a lot of fear because, you know, those who supported apartheid kind of knew. You know, because there's a moral stance, isn't there? It's wrong. It's just wrong. So they kind of know it's wrong, but want to defend it on some level, I think.
Yeah.
You know, defend the indefensible.
I think that's like a lot of it goes back to how, like, even with everything that happened last year with the Black Lives Matter movement and stuff, it was quite interesting to see how many people were shocked by everything. Like a lot of like white friends and family that I've spoken to that were like almost like this was new to them, and I just couldn't believe it. I was just like, it's so interesting that people can kind of ignore what's happening if it doesn't affect them in a negative way. And I think that in itself is like a really important thing that I hope, like, from everything that's been happening, is just going to keep continuing to come out more.
But I think it does affect people. I think it affects everyone, whether they know it or not. I think the denial is a kind of like a sort of underlying of shame.
Yeah.
Okay, because I sort of think you can't live. I believe it's quite difficult to live in a completely unjust society without being affected by the fact that you live, because you sort of know you've built your privilege and on the backs of others suffering. I think collectively that's quite hard to whether you are aware of it or not, because your stance will then always be a defensive one, won't it?
Yeah. You know what I think? It's just general hate. And another thing I was going to say, yeah, if we're not careful, or if the government aren't careful, is we're going to end up in like living in a dictatorship sort of society. So like places that just don't have any freedom. And I think like these little steps, no protesting, and then something else might come out of the blue. I'm not too sure what it could potentially be. We'll just end up living in a dictatorship society, which is extremely dangerous.
But I also believe, because I'm the eternal optimist, okay, is that here we are, okay, with you, Theresa, Alicia, Branwen, Charlie, a generation who have literally woken up and gone, oh, no. This is not how it's going to be. And because you may not see what I have seen, because I've lived a bit longer, and I remember Obama saying the long arm of history, okay, which I always loved. The long arc, he said, the long arc of history is that it doesn't appear it, but this is a really brilliant moment, and it may feel a bit dark, but it isn't, because people aren't asleep. They're alive to what is happening. A generation of, you know, climate change activists, Black Lives Matter, women's movement, hopefully will now, you know, sort of reignite after Me Too, you know, and it's a global phenomenon. It's global. We can see it happening. And I feel really quite positive.
Yeah.
Because I think it's so much better to sort of stand up and fight however way you can than to sort of live in inertia and despondency. Because that is, I think, complicity and despondency is where it all ends.
Yeah.
Literally all ends there.
Which is exactly why people like you, Theresa, like 15 years old, and you're, talking about these issues so amazingly, like the way that you're just speaking about it, and, also starting your charity and all this stuff. I think that's what's going to make a long-lasting change, is just continuing to talk about these things, and people are doing it a lot younger than they ever have before.
I also think there's nothing wrong with being impatient, okay, because there's this weird paradox where things truly have changed in my industry since I started, like really quite dramatically. But it never felt like that at the time, because what happens is, for me, was that we were pushing, and nothing changed. Keep pushing, and then change. So it's like the dam bursts, but you have to keep that pressure. You've got to keep pushing and pushing with a mass of people, and then eventually it flips over. That's just how I've experienced it.
And you have to, suppose, trust in that as well, don't you? That it will at some point. So that's the thing that keeps you pushing when you aren't seeing change.
Yes, correct. That's
and
exactly
so
right.
now with females in the industry, Judy, every time you see a female in the industry, do you feel like you've got this communal sort of bond that's like, you were here, we've done this?
I really do. I really see that with my sort of peers, because there aren't that many of us, to be honest with you, who kind of, there are more of us, but there's more of you, if that makes sense, which is a really great thing. But, the people, my cohort, if you like, there are few, in a way, I suppose there are fewer survivors, because it was very, very hard, particularly with women with children, because we were of a generation, by and large, where, it was still very traditional. The idea, there was still a question mark over women working on some level. It's like, what are you talking about? There's still the whole expectation, which the pandemic has highlighted yet again, okay, where women do the bulk of childcare, caring, domestic, and I don't really care what anyone says. That is going to hold you back. It's going to hold you back. Someone once said to me, "What would you recommend?" I said, "Don't have kids." But I don't mean that. What I mean is, if you're going to have a family, make sure you have it with someone. Make sure you impose the idea that this is co-parenting, and there's no negotiation on that front, and also, that we have to fight for sort of domestic policies and policies for family and childcare, where childcare is subsidised by the state. Everyone gets childcare so that men and women, but particularly women, can keep their careers and keep access to economic empowerment and then professional empowerment.
Yeah.
There's no other, I'm afraid there's no other way through that.
Yeah. I think my mum definitely struggled with that when I was younger. I think she was going through a constant cycle of, because she was she was an only parent at one point. So I had like 7 childminders, a nanny, and that all had to be paid for by everything that she worked for. So it was just this constant cycle of her just earning for someone to look after us, and it would make no sense because she'd have to come home. She may as well have just stayed with us. And
well, except that what I really fundamentally believe, Alicia, is part of your entrepreneur spirit probably comes from your mother, because ultimately the power resides being out in the world. It is very powerful to be a mother. It's the most powerful thing you can do. But I had to also be out of the home. I had to be seen, I had to be visible, I had to be empowered, I had to be economically empowered. Didn't matter if all my money went on childcare. It was my money. I earned it. And that is, there's no getting around that. Girls, women, economic empowerment. It's why in developing countries, the moment women have their own source of income, they stop having lots of children.
How have you found, because obviously, especially in the film industry in particular, what type of like challenges have you overcome from being in quite a male dominated industry, especially back in the day? Have you really noticed like changes, and like what kind of struggles did you overcome at the beginning compared to now?
Okay, so the expectation when I started was that I would be someone's assistant, end of. I would be someone's secretary. I wouldn't have an autonomous route into the industry, that I would have to serve some bloke. And that was perpetrated by, my mum, who, she just wanted me to have a sort of, regular job and go and do a secretarial course. I'm like, no. And so the changes, by and large, it was very difficult to get into the industry anyway, because it was very unionised. So unless you were a member of the union or knew someone in the union, you couldn't actually get into the industry. So you had to do it by other means. And so, in a way, there was no roadmap to getting into there is a roadmap now, because it's become a lot more corporately driven. I'd say the industry is less sort of maverick. It's an easier way to get into the industry, and it's also harder because you literally have to sort of go up a particular ladder, whereas it was a bit more free for all, like how do we get in, let's bend the rules, let's do this, let's do that. And so obviously even now it is still quite fascinating. I'll give you an example. I was in LA when the Me Too movement was literally at its height, and the Weinstein, accusations were really like massively in the media. And I went out for lunch with a couple of male agents from a very, very big agency. And the three men at the table were discussing the Me Too movement, and not one asked my opinion. And it felt like what they were most concerned about was how it was going to affect them. And that was 2 years ago.
Wow.
So there's still a lot of work to be done, I would suggest, because it is still a bit of a minefield. But having said that, I've worked with the greatest. I am privileged to work with some of the funniest, most brilliant men I've ever met in my life. A lot of what I call refugees from the 80s who were fighting, gay rights, women's rights, civil and political rights. We all came up at that time, and they're my sort of tribe. But the difference is, I think, is the thing that I found almost devastating was trying to get things made from a different point of view, trying to get the types of stories that women wanted to tell about women, or Black artists wanted to tell from a point of view of an experience, and we never got to make them. I mean, it was literally, it was, you wouldn't believe the stuff I'd hear from commissioners. I mean, it was absolutely shocking.
Really?
And, devastatingly shocking. I mean, unspeakable, actually. But, again, there was a tipping point. And I guess it was our generation of people who kept pushing forward and saying, no, we need more, and no, we need this, no, we need that. And ultimately that tipping point changed, and it will always change by who is in power ultimately, because they make the decisions, and they still make the decisions, and that is changing. And I've had many conversations with commissioners who so many of them now, I really like and respect, because they've been on a very tough journey. And even when they're in their position of power, they still have to fight the board. And that board very often is very unenlightened.
Yeah.
Very unenlightened still, you know. But I have seen far, far more, you know, there's just more. I think we've got a long way to go. I think there's a massive gap in terms of Black and ethnic minority producers, directors. Less writers are now coming up quite well, I think. There's a long way to go, trust me. There's a long way to go. But there's a gap between people really now wanting to come into the industry, and again, it's a generational thing, and people with experience to really populate the sort of upper echelons. But that just takes that is, I think, changing. I think it's changing. I think the whole constant pushing of, you know, Black and ethnic minorities. For example, I would say BAFTA this year, for the first time, has a far more representative shortlist than ever. And they made a really concerted, they did proper, I can't explain it. I think it Black Lives Matter had a proper effect. Me Too had a proper effect on the industry. Leisha will know this. The whole introduction of intimacy coordinators, which has literally happened in 2 years since Me Too.
Yeah.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
That is incredible.
Judy, you mentioned something about it's not like, you know, like not even beating around the bush to get into certain places within the industry. I learnt this term in school. I think it's called cultural capital. It's not what you know, it's about who you know.
Yeah.
And I think it's a bit sad. At the time, it's a bit sad, you know, or what if I don't know somebody? That's basically your dream sort of crushed, because it's like, I don't know someone who can help me. And it's so sad. And I feel like that's why I think now, even just moving in terms of like generations or whatever, that networking is such an important thing.
It's key.
Because even though cultural capital is, I wouldn't say a thing of the past, 'cause it's still here, but you need to, you know, make yourself known. And it isn't just within the industry. Maybe it's within school or within uni. I can't go to this certain level because I don't know who this person is, or I can't get their contact. And I think that that's why I thank God for like things like the Girls Network, who really allow you to meet different people. And, you know, it's amazing. Like without the Girls Network, I wouldn't have been speaking about my experiences or my business. And I think it's just so important. Yes, networking is a really big thing in today's society. And I think the more we network, the more, you know, less ignorant people will be to certain things like Black Lives Matter or feminism. Because you're like, I'm sharing my opinion on why I do this or why I do that. Because there are a lot of non-profit organizations that we have today. But because of you don't know people, it's really hard. So yeah.
I mean, I don't know whether any of you have watched It's a Sin, Russell T Davids's series about the AIDS. Okay, I mean, it's important, you know. I've had a lot of chats recently because, you know, that happened 25 years ago, and a whole generation of gay men died, and they were let die by prejudice, homophobia, and the government. And that was 25 years ago. And that generation, I lost a lot of friends. And it's important to sort of understand that there's always been a fight. There's always been a fight. And we're all fighting the same people.
Yeah.
You know? Mm-hmm. And that's why I thought it was the most amazing series to capture what happened, you know? Because it's important that you know, any generation that comes along that has a fight, you can learn a lot. You know, the ACT UP movement really changed. They just went head to head with governments all over the world. They went head to head and said, right, we're not going to die. And they were up against death and ignorance. And I think a lot of people can, you know, today can learn about organisational protest. You know, they did a really, really, really good job. Really good job. And they targeted very big corporations, and they targeted the medical, and they targeted, you know, because their lives were on the line. Mm-hmm. So I listen to podcasts with him, and I just think that, you know, despite everything, despite all the negativity and all the fear, we're actually in quite a good place, genuinely, because here we are having a talk about here's Theresa, who's, you know, going to run the show in about 10 years' time.
Yeah.
Prime Minister.
Yeah. Prime Minister.
Yeah.
Is that the plan?
Yeah.
Is that the plan, Theresa?
Yeah, that's the plan. That's
Great.
the plan.
Okay.
We heard it here first.
Yes.
Wicked.
Love it.
I know, Theresa, you said that you were like Miss Teen Nigeria. How was the process for you, and was it really competitive? How did you find it?
Okay, wow. So Miss Teen Nigeria, I think in a whole pandemic, I think that in itself, it was able to go through a whole pandemic without any interruptions. It was really hard though. I think just being in that zone to like concentrate, to always be on job, to always make sure you have X, Y, and Z planned in the middle of a pandemic, which was really hard. Competition wise, yes, it was quite competitive because people were bringing a lot of things to the table, and it's like, you need to be on top. You have to be on top and stay on top. Like always having ideas at the back of your head ready. If someone's doing that, what can I do better? And I think having a creative mind is really important. Like always being able to spew out and throw out ideas which are completely amazing. So yeah, it was quite competitive. And in terms of voting as well, like 1 minute you'd be at the top, the next minute you'd be at the bottom. And because the voting wasn't actually on like a voting panel website, it was through Instagram. So it was basically people had to like your picture. And it was like 1 minute someone would be at the top, more votes than you. So yeah, it was just quite crazy, to be honest. But I really enjoyed it. I'm happy. I met a lot of new people who are now like my friends for life.
Aww,
I've been in different like situations, and I think it's kind of built up like how I react to things as well. Because usually, like if I hear something that I don't like, I'm gonna say I don't like it. You know, I think sometimes it's kind of like told not even to like relax myself, but sometimes wait for the right opportunity to mention it. You know, so stuff like that. And I think it's kind of helped me with the unwritten rules of society, how to respect people that are older than you. And respect is a key thing. Like I was saying it yesterday to my friends, that respect is the key to a lot of things. Because if you don't respect people, no one's going to respect you. I believe in what goes around comes around, so karma. So, or whatever you sow is what you're going to reap. So I think that sort of respect thing is so important. And it's actually gotten me throughout the competition without being kicked out, without dropping out. So, yeah.
That's amazing. It's also great practice for when you become the Prime Minister for all the voting. And
Alicia, can I just also, you know, I'm so impressed. I mean, Theresa, you literally are going to go very, very far, if not to the top. I was just thinking about what you said about the changes that have taken place in the industry. So I just want to talk a little bit about representation, because it's a really interesting moment in that as well. I think because of our, you know, the sort of journey I've been on. So basically, women were only really cast as prostitutes, nurses, or someone's wife. And gradually, you know, because more women ended up writing film and TV and directing it, gradually how women were represented. There were always female filmmakers, a lot of European filmmakers who wanted to represent women in a different way and tell stories in a different way. And I think really now what's happening is there's a greater degree of granularity about representation, actually. And that is also because of what I loosely call sort of Black Lives Matter, which, you know, the desire to have more men and women from Black and ethnic minorities, not just in front of the camera, but very, very much so behind the camera. And by that, I mean producing, which is is what I do, which is really a really important role, directing and writing. Those are the three sort of headline in my particular business. But also there's a move towards people from different backgrounds to be critics, for example. So that when any form of creative endeavour is reviewed, it isn't the sort of myopic view of, a white person from Oxbridge. And so all of it isn't just one thing that's had to change. It's everything has to be opened up. You can't have just, because part of the problem is you might have a lot more actors, you might have a lot more women in front of camera, but if it's only being written about from the white Oxbridge guy's point of view, then that's still not opening it up. So it has changed tremendously. And I think we're in another big push at the moment for much greater diversity, both in front, behind, sideways, any which way.
You're absolutely right, because I think as well, like, the truth is, if it's not happening behind the camera as well, then there's still a massive issue that needs to be resolved. And I think it's so easy, especially with media, films and TVs and adverts, to see more diversity happening and just assume that the problem is fixed. But actually, exactly like what you're saying, I think there's still a way to go with that. And I think having more, diversity behind the cameras is equally as important. If anything, more important, just because the stories that, like you said, different perspectives that need to be told.
You can't write an experience for someone who doesn't have that experience.
I just want to counter that though, Alicia, because I sort of feel like creativity and imagination are actually not limited, and it's just that it's because I would worry that it becomes about no one can tell that story. I can't write about, if I'm a writer, I can only write about a female experience. I have an issue if it becomes that siloed, okay? Because great talent is great talent, and great talent should be able to go wherever it wants to go.
Yeah.
Okay? Because, because imagination is imagination. Now, I'm not saying, of course, it's very difficult. Why would you want to tell a story from this point of view if, a guy's going to tell a story about a woman having an abortion, for example? Okay, yes, agree. That might be, But collaboration is very interesting, So I believe that all creative endeavour is kind of like a collaboration. There needs a redressing of for opportunities and for the amount of people, because if you have a mixed economy everywhere, it's better for everything. It's like, I always go, it's like the comprehensive school system is always better if it's funded properly, so that everyone is in it together. You have mixed experiences, diversity, cultural. This is very creative. Okay, it's just that it needs redressing at the moment, but I wouldn't want to limit people's creativity.
I was going to say, just talking about that, there was a play that I was in 2018 called The Tide that was written by a very good friend of mine. I didn't know her at the time. She's way older than me, but I look up to her for inspiration a lot of the time. Her name's Enemua, and she wrote a play based on life of refugees and what they have to go through. And it was really powerful. Like, you had people in the audience shedding tears. And, when you say something like creativity is so powerful, like, you don't have to live the experience, but from what you see and what you hear, you can kind of put it together. Imagine what would it be like, even though let's say it may not be the true or 100%. This is how it is, like a copy and paste of it, but it's how you can interpret it and put it into different ways, show it in different ways. It doesn't have to be like a built refugee camp, because our design, the set, it was literally like trampolines on the stage, a backstage door, something like that, and it was just going up, and you were able to play a story and put a story together on that. So it doesn't have to be, the exact thing. I think when creativity comes into play, everything can happen, anything can work, and it can be amazing. So
Yeah.
I definitely agree with your point, Judy.
Because I think in the end, our commonality is our humanity, and any, talent, I think really good talent connects to that empathy, really connects to that sort of empathetic understanding of the human experience in different conditions. And that's really what I'm talking about. So if you watch something like Steve McQueen's Small Axe, Lovers Rock is literally one of the greatest films ever made, because the universality of going through a party, right? It's still the same. Come on, the same things still happen at a party. And it was specific, but it was universal. There's something brilliant about that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. What advice would you give to any aspiring creatives listening?
Stay on the bus. That's what Grayson Perry said. I think we have a sort of, I think it goes persistence, ambition, talent, in that order. Okay? Because you've got to persist. Because if you are talented, you will triumph. But if you don't, no one will ever know. So persistence is key. You literally get pushed down, you've got to bounce back up. You get to push down, you've got to bounce back up, because eventually, if you have talent, you do actually have to have talent, but eventually your persistence will pay off. That's the key to it all, persistence.
I think one thing I would say to people of my generation, if you have that idea, make it work somehow, somewhere. Like, I think by my opening my business, My Body Is Mine, it's really showing me that people go through things, and it isn't just something, you see in the media or in the news. Like, I've spoken to people who have been sexually assaulted, who have been raped, or who are going through like that stage in their life of period poverty and whatever. And it just opens your eyes, so you don't know what your idea can do. Literally, I've been getting messages throughout this week saying, your business page has touched me. I don't think you understand. And I think that in itself is an encouragement to me, like, Theresa, keep going. That opportunities may close, doors may close, but doors will always open again. Like, my mum used to say, my mum and a lot of people that are my mum's age that come from Nigeria say, when one door closes, another opportunity opens. And you never know why that door may have closed. It may bring a sign of that discouragement. Maybe this person doesn't want me. Maybe I'm not good enough. Remove those thoughts out of your head, because I feel like once you remove those thoughts out of your head, you're just going to keep striving and moving. And at the end of the day, your doorstep will be greatness. I think people need to realise that. And I think even though I haven't made it far, or I will make it far, I believe so, that just that strength to keep going on. Because when people can see, oh, this door has been closed, but she's still gone on, people will look at you and be like, this is the type of person I want to be. Someone who wants to continue to strive and achieve greatness, even though doors have been closed. So yeah, just keep any idea, put it onto paper, make something, even if it's small. You never know where it'll get you. But yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure how to follow those, really. I suppose the thing I would say is, and I think it's true for creativity as well as other things, is to surround yourself with a network of people that are good sounding boards, that are critical friends, are encouragers and champions and supporters as well. Because I think those moments where you're tired or things are hard or you've had a knockback or rejection, that's when having those people around you, knowing who they are to go to, will be the thing that helps you to persist. And reminds you, as Theresa said, that there are many opportunities out there, and actually doors will open. So yeah, I think that's what I'd say. Surround yourself with a good group of people.
Thank you, girls, so much for coming on. It was incredible to talk to you, and your voices are going to be heard. You are incredible, and I can't wait to see where you go, Theresa. Hopefully the Prime Minister, please. But I hope you have a lovely weekend. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Lovely to see you.
Lovely to chat to you.
Thank you. Really lovely to meet you, Judy.
Thank you very much for having me.
Really great to meet you all. You're very inspiring women.